It's time for Jiving with Joey. Hey, honey.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Here's your coffee.
Excellent.
So today you might see a little guest of the commentary, Mr. Odieheim Meyer-Schmidt.
That's not his name.
No, that's part of his song whenever I go goofy and just see him walking around and I randomly call him that and sing a song with it.
He looks embarrassed every time.
Yeah. He's just a regular kid, just looking embarrassed when mommy, does her goofy things. But yes, he's our little guy, Odie. He's 2 years old, an Aussie doodle. So every so often he'll say, "Hello, mate."
And that doesn't happen either.
So we did a previous video. Hopefully you just watched it. If not, it'd be great maybe to take a look at that one. It gives our entire journey between homeschooling and public schooling. And that was basically our journey, how it was God-led to determine between the two. In a less goofy way, we're going to go ahead and go over the pros and cons, what your perceptions were, what just both of our perceptions were before really understanding more about homeschooling, what his perceptions are now, what the pros and cons have been of each that we have noticed, and then also including the pros and cons of having returned back to public schooling and what we saw as a family. So hopefully some of this can help you either in your decision to homeschool for the first time or in general. So what would you say was your perception of homeschooling in the past?
When you initially brought it up, I was very dismissive. I thought it was, to be honest, a little crazy.
I don't think you took me seriously at first, really. Like,
no,
you were just like really how we portrayed in the video. It's like, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I was dismissive. And at some point, I was getting kind of tired of the questions, and mainly because of the questions that most people have when you hear homeschooling, right? Like, you have the idea of kids who just have trouble talking to people and they're just awkward, which I've since learned is not even close to the case.
That's true. That's very true.
That is it even legal to do it? Are we qualified, or really you? Because at the time I was in my office most of the time, so I'm running through my head like, you're gonna sit in here with these 3 kids and educate them. It was really hard for me to grasp that was a viable way to do it.
Yeah, that's what I would call it. Is this a viable thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it did definitely, my initial perception was, this isn't for our family. This is going to be rough.
And maybe we should explain that we both come from a public school background. Besides, I'm talking public school. I did go to private school at some point. You went through public school the entire time, like where he lived is where he went. And I went to a few different schools, so we tended to move around a bit, but it wasn't ever anything that was even a perceived thing when I was younger. I had no understanding or even awareness of homeschooling altogether.
I didn't either. I don't think I knew a homeschooled person.
Yeah. And a big thing was, why would we ever want to do this, right? You were saying of whether we could do this, but the question was like, why would we ever want to do this? I think you had asked at some point, or one of us was thinking like, why would we want to have the kids around all day? It kind of goes against the nature of life to have your kids around all day. And that, of course, was our conditioning from our traditions of what we normally did. But of course, historical foundations of homeschooling are millennia compared to what we do as traditional today. It just felt unnatural, and that was kind of an interesting perspective that we had back then that we know so differently now.
Yep.
Not that it's easy. I'm just saying that is easy, but
we'll get to that for sure. I guess I'll add as well, like I run through a lot of stuff. Like you bring up an idea like that, and I'm already running through like, well, how would we even share this with the families we know, our family? Like, what are they gonna think? Like, we say this, and I guess the stigma of homeschooling also played a part when you brought it up initially.
We'll call it a concern package.
Yeah.
We had a package of a bunch of concerns in it that, definitely, that was like the big loaf of bread that's sticking out of the bag all the time. And we remember, like, we had to actually focus on walking through the concerns that we had, and of course having some bravery at the very beginning. That was a lot of bravery that had to happen because that was scary, but we had to work on that part and just starting to kind of hold on to God's hands while we're still like looking things up and planning and holding God's hand. Don't let go of God's hands.
And I'll add here as well, during this time, I'm a fairly new Christian, so leaning on God initially was not always my first go-to. I just started thinking in my logical mind, like, this is going to be hard. I'm not going to be home. That also played a part in the initial decision. Was she keeps asking for this, I won't even be here. So if she really wants it, then let's just do it. I wouldn't say I was great at it at first. Just, all right, let me get into prayer about this. But I will say, like, if it ultimately is a God-leaning event, he'll step in. He'll, even in our shortcomings or my shortcomings or my lack of prayers or my lack of faith, he'll step in and put us in the right spot.
Definitely. And so what would you say would be the pros and cons off the top of your head about homeschooling as we got into it? Now, we had been homeschooling until we made a shift, and that's, detailed in the video, but we were homeschooling for 4 years. That being said, we're not experts in homeschooling. So in our 4 years, the pros and cons that we experience as a homeschooler.
Well, I'll start with the cons, because I don't want to end it with all the good stuff.
Yeah.
I'd say the initial cons would be right out of the gate. What curriculum are we going to use? Because it turns out there's a lot. Like literature-based to online-based to virtual.
To Charlotte Mason and traditional and classical and Waldorf and blah, 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 blah.
You can even get to a normal classroom setting through co-ops. So once we started peeling that back, I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be way more involved than I initially thought. And I initially thought it was going to be really involved. So, and then I would also say you're really praying that your kids can gel together. And, I have a younger brother, and I think about times where there were days where it would not work. Like we just didn't get along all the time. We got along fairly well, but there were definitely days where it would have been a nightmare. So you have to think the dynamics of 3 different kids.
Or more,
yeah.
Or less, or less, yeah. I mean,
their personalities and their learning styles, like how to get that all to fit together on a day-to-day basis, that was a concern. That was a concern. So how that played out for us was sometimes our middle son just did not want to do the work, and that was tough. And then our oldest son, sometimes we felt like we maybe been slowing him down a little bit because we're trying to fit the box for all 3. And this is a con to homeschooling
for us. And the idea was that we were starting and we're learning, and as it turns out, that con, once you learn how to actually do this well, that's a huge pro.
Yeah. And if you extrapolate that to a public school setting, you start realizing we're doing this with 3. These teachers are doing it with 15 to 20.
22 this past semester for one of
What
our
does
kids,
that got to look like for these teachers having to deal with 22 different personalities and speeds and likes and dislikes?
Learning styles. And
So once we broke that, it's like, okay, well, you know what? We can take this con and turn it into a pro. We can learn, we can get to know our kids at a deeper level, and now we can tailor the education to them. We take a con, turn it into a pro. And
that's a con that we noticed, but it very well is turning into a very big pro as we are really owning how we can homeschool well in our homes. And it takes a little bit of time to break through how to actually do this well and break through like what you're traditionally thinking as this is how you educate a person. This is how you grow. A mature person is in this box, and there's definitely not a box.
And I guess this could be a con too, would be scheduling, because in my head I'm thinking, all right, well, let's just keep it to the school schedule. Let's get them up at this time. Let's start school at 8 a.m. Let's have lunch at this block. And still, to this day, I have to break that mindset of it's got to follow a traditional school system and program and curriculum. That's a con. The pro is you have flexibility and freedom to do what you want. Right?
Yeah. And some parameters and things to stick to, but the reality is that you can choose to homeschool middle of the night if you want to, if it works for your family. I mean, probability is during the daytime, ideally. There's circadian rhythms that we have to stick to, people. But the idea is you can really choose whatever block of time. If you're a working person during the day and you really have to be, homeschool at night, you have to make some arrangements for the children, however you need to work that out. But the idea is you can really choose whatever time of the day as long as it works for your family. So that's really a fantastic pro. That's been a con for us because as we have over the 4 years, and I explained in the video that we had 2 moves during these 4 years. So that really threw wrenches for us because every move you're just reestablishing yourself, and it was a really big hurdle to get over in every different setting that we had during those 2 moves. So we had 3 different homes, and it just takes a little bit of time to reacclimate to your new setting and then reestablish your routine. So once you are able to set yourself up nicely, you can actually determine what a good schedule and flow, and that the reality is it's going to take a little bit of trial and error, and there's so many great videos that wonderful parents have put out there of things that they have tried that work well for them. And what you're looking for is not something necessarily that will be exactly plug and play, but you're looking for inspirations and ways to take a piece of that puzzle and a piece of that puzzle, a piece of that puzzle here, and then meanwhile being covered all in prayer, because you're covering it all in prayer. God's going to start feeding you with the things that he needs you to do so that he knows how you work so well, and that he's going to be like, okay, ultimately she's going to come up with what I need her to come up with. And what we noticed, another big thing, I want to talk about self-care, because definitely during this period of time we were just, it was such a mold for us to break that we put ourselves in the back burner. So self-care for us during these 4 years, we did a video on self-care because that's really one of the things that fell in the back burner for us as we were trying to break the deep and solid mold of what we understood was traditional schooling. One of the first things to go was self-care, and that video will go over a lot of the reasons why the foundation of your homeschooling, your basically your marriage, your family life is going to be self-care. That's why God said, I live in your body, honor me with your body. So that should be right up there with the importance of your faith, is honoring your health, so that you can homeschool well. And that was part of one of the cons of homeschooling that we experienced at the very beginning, and we needed to be very intentional about reestablishing that for a healthy just family life altogether.
Yeah.
And your family functionality will thank you for it. So now we've talked some of the negatives of homeschooling. Let's talk about the pros.
The biggest, when I really bought into homeschooling, was when the autonomy started showing up. When it's a Wednesday and we're just like, the kids are just, they don't want to do it and we don't really feel like it. And it's like, you know what? Let's just pack up and go to the beach.
Yeah.
Let's just go to the beach. No one's going to be there. We have the beach to ourselves, middle of the week. That's when I started going, hey, you know what? There's something to this. There's something to this.
There's some bonuses.
I think
to the hard work.
Another one was coming out of the pandemic. You know, where we live, things opened up a little faster, and we had season passes to a theme park, and to actually be able to go in the middle of the week. That's amazing. And nobody was there.
Relatively speaking, I mean, there's still a lot of people.
There were
theme parks and Disney.
Nothing like
Universal.
how it would have been in a normal year. And it's the benefits that we have of that. And then, of course, we took an extended trip. We spent a month in a different state.
Yeah.
Brought all of our stuff with us.
That was amazing.
But we were able to do school. I was able to work. And we were able to spend an entire month outside of our state. When that started really showing up, that's when I was all in. I'm like, all right, we're not going back.
And that also translates to financial benefits there, because when we are able to go, first of all, the experiences that we were able to have when we were going to places where it wasn't peak season, that was really cool. Some really tailored experiences for the kids. They got to experience, I remember distinctly going to a reenactment, and there was no one there, but all the actors, all the volunteer actors were there, and they were actually really well trained. And I thought there was a smith making, he was like in a full on blacksmith hut or whatever, and he had the fire going, and he was going like this and like hammering something, and the kids went up and
not their teeth,
we don't chisel the kids' teeth. That's another video. And we were able to get in there, and he gave his whole spiel, and then on the side I'm sitting there like, how long have you worked here? And I'm thinking he's gonna say, oh, I've been here 4 years, I live down the street and downtown, blah blah blah. And he was just like, well, my father and his father before him were smiths, and so as a 7-year-old boy, I went, and he just gave me this whole story. He didn't break character, and I was like, at first, but really, how long, I really want to know your story. And he's like, yeah, that's my story. He just never broke character, and I thought that was so cool. But the kids got to go in the back and got to like hammer their own little nail. We still have that. It was just really enriching experiences. And we pay either the same amount or less because it's off-season time. So you have an enriching experience for most likely less cost because the hotels are cheaper, the travel is cheaper, just in general. So it was really good. It's been really, really good. That's been a really cool bonus. And on top of that, when Joe was talking about us taking, a day off in the middle of the week, well, the cool thing about that is we could take the day off in the middle of the week, and then we come back and we do schooling at the end of the day. Or
tack it into the weekend.
Tack it into the weekend. It's just amazingly flexible, versatile. But there has to be some structure that you try to stick to. There has to be like a skeleton of a schedule that you have. And because you're either your state or your parental responsibility mindset will keep you there. And a pro that I definitely wanted to mention was being able to find the curriculums that really worked well for our kids. Now, there is a world of curriculum. When you go to a homeschooling convention and you go into the if you go into the conference area or whatever, the hall, you're like,
yeah, you might think that a homeschool convention will be at your local library and there's like a little section there for all you pick up your books for. No, again, blown away. Like you step into this thing and it's a massive convention hall filled with families doing this, filled with curriculums, filled with ideas and exploration and that's where it can be overwhelming because it's.
But you can't help but be excited though. Like I walked through there, I'm like, oh cool. Oh,
it took 3 days to get through it. We probably still didn't see everything.
Yeah, and you can't help but get excited to see all the different things that you can explore during the year with your children that might really spark the love of learning or a love of a topic, or it can give you an opportunity to really determine what your children's bends are, their natural bends, or spark some interest and love. So yeah, it's an experience that was a huge pro to see, and definitely setting the expectation that you're going to have a learning curve and you're going to go through trial and error, and that's going to involve some money spent on things that you're not going to use. But don't let that get you stressed out, because it did get me stressed out. Like, oh my gosh, I spent this and I'm not going to use it. Well, you want to give it a shot. There's definitely also something that we did end up buying that I thought, oh, this is not working, but I kept hearing such fantastic things about it. It's a math curriculum that we use, and it was like, okay, I'm going to have to give it a second chance here. And I called the company and I had a session with them to learn how to use the curriculum well. And I was totally not using it well. That's why it wasn't working for us. And we were getting frustrated by it. And then all of a sudden now we use it well and it's like amazing. So it's just a journey, and having the expectation that you're not going to get it right from the beginning and have some grace there.
Yeah. Okay, so we touched a lot of the pros and cons, and there's still much more. So please interact with us if you want to know more about this. But we did ultimately decide to go back to public school. So for us, we are fortunate that we have great public schools in our system. Obviously, we toured them. I grew up where we're at, so it was pretty easy. I knew that this school was good, and I went to the school that our middle schooler is going to. Right off the bat, we got the chance to interact with great staff, and they were very accessible for us, which was necessary. Obviously, coming from the 4 years of what we did, there was concerns, right? How are the kids going to deal with it? How are we going to deal with it? What's the systems like? Or how different is it from when we were just a few years ago? But they were great. All the staff met with us and really kind of helped us get integrated really fast.
Overall, just a testament to God and His direction and how He was okay for us to reintegrate. Because I know that's not the story for some families that we have talked with about reintegration and whatnot into school. So we are grateful, praise the Lord for that, for our experience. Yep. What I definitely wanted to talk about as a pro for sure is our faith walk. It allowed us to put ourselves in a place to really rely on God for our next step, because we weren't really excited about reintegrating or having the kids go back to traditional schooling, but it put us in a place where, after going through the process that we mentioned in the video, we realized the benefit of being able to be in a place of trusting that this was God's direction and that we were hanging on to Him and praying over the kids every day. And it doesn't mean that it was going to be comfortable or easy, or just like anything that is fine. You have to go through pressure to get there, right? So the wine and the diamonds and the pearls, all these things go through pressure to become fine. And I think that's going to be part of any faith walk, is that we're going to go through pressure. So that was an opportunity for us to put ourselves in a place where, hey, we have to trust in the Lord that this is the right path.
I think as Christians, what we could do, and I think a lot of homeschoolers might run into this, you kind of want to keep your kids in a Christian box. You want to be able to have a lot of say around who are they hanging around.
Yeah, they call it a bubble.
Yeah, the Christian bubble.
Yeah.
So that was a concern that
we have them out in the world and exploring, and we push them out to do things, but it's definitely a difference between having those
day in and day out
sporadic
hours.
As opposed to public schooling. Being, like you said, day in and day out for such a lengthy period of time. But the opportunity to do that, knowing that we have the heart of homeschooling because of, again, what I said in the video was Deuteronomy 6:6-9 calls all of us to homeschool our children, whether they be in public school or not. We are to train our children in the ways that they should go, and being able to have them go out into the world, and then us being very intentional about their experience and checking the pulse on their life, being very involved and whatnot. That was helpful to have them out in the world, because we did get some benefits from that really fortify the training that we want to give them as Christians and homeschoolers, because they were out in the world when they're in public school, and that helped us, I think, during this particular season, during this pause.
Absolutely.
So in the previous video, we went over in hindsight, what we would have done to kind of streamline the process of defining which way we should go, in not just decisions between homeschooling or public schooling, but also particularly in deciding any big decision, how to keep God involved in it and just make sure that you're walking in a path where He is ahead of you, and opening doors, closing doors, and just kind of stay like, this is my plan. Not that you don't have to plan, you gotta plan, but like, this is my plan, but here you go, here, just open hands with your plan right in front of you, just waiting for Him to shift and just kind of be pliable to His direction. So we defined that for you, and it's also in the freebie that we've included for this video, so go ahead and download that, and hopefully that gives you a nice little path to save you some of the headache that oftentimes we go through when we're just spinning in the hamster wheel and getting nowhere because God's not in it. So the final thing that I definitely want to mention is huge in the homeschooling communities. In just our little 4 years of being homeschoolers, we consistently hear how every year you just take it year by year, sometimes semester by semester, like we ended up having to do. We generally hear from almost every single homeschooling family that we've talked to is they take it year by year. So every year they have an expectation that they're going to get together and assess their current situation per child and define where God is for this particular person, basically reassess and create a new educational plan. What else are you going to involve? What's the schedule going to look like? And all those things, you're going to kind of have to go into that every single year. That's kind of my biggest takeaway, is that you prioritize that time and that you know it's coming, and that you pretty much start planning it out, kind of considering next year early on, probably late fall, October, November, start dabbling with what next year's going to look like, because January, February is when a lot of people are moving to going into open houses and going into different programs that perhaps are going to be supplementary for homeschooling. Or in general, you might want to be, if you're going to choose to go into a public school setting, you might have some charter school applications that are due by February timeframe or whatnot. So you really want to be considering education kind of consistently, but early for next year, for August, is like October of the previous year. So it's really important, because sometimes I think for the several years we were caught like, oh, we're early in March, and no, we're not early in March. You're super late, you're kind of super late in March. But that was a huge takeaway for us that we have learned, and it would save a lot of headaches.
I think to add to that, you can hear something like that and be like, see, this is why I don't want to deal with homeschooling, because all that planning, and it's just not for me, and I don't want to mess my kids up by moving them around. Our kids have been moved. They've moved houses, they've moved schools, they've been in homeschool, they went back to public school. Yeah. They're fine.
They're very adaptable.
Yes, they are adaptable. And, and as a matter of fact, they were even excited. You're like, oh, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to go to this school. And then, usually a few weeks into that, they were like, okay, this has been cool. Can we go back to homeschooling now? So I think that if you're nervous about that, if you're nervous about your ability to do this and to schedule and to plan and to educate, there's a plethora of resources available to help you. If you're worried about
messing up your kids in general.
Yes. Again, that's not every kid. And some people the homeschooling just won't work. But if it's something that's tugging at your heart, give it a shot, give it a try. And I think the worst thing you can do is you can give it a go. And if you're just not feeling it, you can always put them back into school.
Yeah.
So that is.
And the idea is that, feeling it is subjective. Like there's several days that it's natural not to feel it, and it could last a while. You can have a chunk of weeks that you're just like, I'm not feeling this, because again, it's that process of refining something to become fine. But the idea is you're not going to always feel it, but that doesn't mean that is time to pivot. So it's definitely a challenge, and we made fun of it in the video of just the fact that people think, oh, grass is greener on the other side. Anything worthwhile is probably going to be difficult. And this is certainly true with homeschooling. So,
and if I could
but
add,
is it worthy?
And if I can add the flip of this, if you're a homeschooling parent who's maybe just burnt out, you're tired, you haven't been doing self-care, you've hit a wall and you're not giving it your all, don't be afraid to put your kid back in public school for a little while. Give yourself a break, recharge,
reset.
It may rekindle your love for why you started homeschooling in the first place. It gives your kid a different viewpoint, perspective as well on education. So don't be afraid to do that for a semester or however long you need, and then always reset and bring them back.
Yeah, just set the right expectations that we're pivoting, we're trying this out, we've been praying on this, and this is the direction. Just do the things intentionally, clinging to God and always seeking to honor Him, because that's always how things are going to have the better chance of working out for the ultimate grand scale good, your good and His glory. So that's the biggest takeaway that we can give here. Have the family united, kind of, I would say, talk about these decisions. Ultimately, you make the best choice as the parent of the children outside of their comforts. But when we're clinging to each other with the Lord above us, we're going to be, and ahead of us, we're going to be in the best possible scenario, even though it's not going to necessarily feel easy or comfortable. But the good news is that we can trust in Him. So thank you for hanging with us and being with us during this talk. We are really excited about the upcoming videos that we have. And we talked a lot about self-care. We made a recent video for that too, that was touching on a lot of key points and ideas that you can do to design and define your own self-care routine, and just how important and vital that is for your family functionality. So you can watch those next. So that's all we got for today. Thank you, honey.
And remember, keep trying and find your family flow.
Bye.